There was a time when Earth wore a colder face, when continents glimmered beneath miles of ice, and the winds carried a softer, slower breath. Tonight, we step gently into that ancient winter. Welcome to AstraFlow. Here, science drifts like starlight, and curiosity becomes calm. Tonight, let your thoughts slow down, your breathing find its rhythm, and your mind float through wonder. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying in bed under city lights, or watching the stars from somewhere quiet? Tell me in the comments. It's always peaceful to imagine the AstraFlow community scattered across the world, drifting together through the same sky. And if this calm journey brings you peace, you can gently support AstraFlow by liking this video or subscribing. It helps this little corner of the cosmos keep glowing. Now, sink softly into your pillow. Feel your body warming beneath your blankets, the air around you settling into a slower pulse. Let the noise of the day fade like footprints in fresh snow. Everything you've done today can rest now. Everything waiting tomorrow can wait a little longer. This moment is just for you. A quiet space to drift and breathe and listen. As your breath moves in and out, imagine a long winter horizon stretching before you. Pale light pouring across an ancient landscape. A sky washed in silver blue, and beneath your feet, the earth as it once was, a world wrapped in ice. During the Ice Age, Earth didn't feel fast. It didn't roar or blaze or rush. It exhaled slowly. Glaciers advancing inch by inch, winds humming low across open plains, oceans drawing back to reveal hidden lands. Time itself seemed to thicken, moving with the patience of cold water. Tonight, we will wander through that world as though drifting through a quiet dream. We'll step beside mammoths walking across frozen tundra, feel the hush of snow beneath the ancient skies, and watch continents reshape themselves under the silent weight of ice. You don't need to remember any details. Just let the rhythm of the story carry you. The world we're entering is gentle, slow, and vast, a place where thoughts can unwind and sleep can find you like a soft snowfall. So, let your eyelids grow heavier, let the warmth around your body deepen, and imagine the first breath of cold air touching an ancient earth. Now let's begin tonight's voyage into the quiet story of what Earth looked like during the Ice Age. When we look back into the deep past, into ages shaped by cold and sculpted by silence, a gentle question rises. What does it mean for a planet to change so slowly that a lifetime feels like a moment, and a millennium feels like a breath? The Ice Age invites us to consider time in a softer way, not as hours and schedules, but as a vast unfolding rhythm, where landscapes drift, climates shift, and entire worlds transform without hurry. As you settle into this quiet moment, imagine standing on a frozen plain thousands of years ago. Around you, the wind moves in calm, steady waves. Nothing rushes, nothing demands. The earth itself seems to be breathing in a slower language. And here, within this stillness, the question unfolds. How do we understand a world that changes so gradually, so gently, that its story can only be felt through patience? The Ice Age reminds us that our perspective is small but meaningful. We move quickly. Our days flicker by like candlelight. But Earth moves with a deeper pulse. During the Ice Age, continents were not frozen suddenly. The transformation was a whisper, a long exhale across tens of thousands of years. Ice flowed like slow rivers. Forests migrated like drifting shadows. Seas withdrew inch by inch. Nothing about this ancient world was abrupt. It was a symphony of slow adjustments. And yet, even within this unhurried world, every small shift carried purpose. A slight cooling of air, a quiet change in sunlight, a subtle tilt of Earth's axis. These delicate motions shaped everything, the shape of coastlines, the breath of ecosystems, the path of humans and animals across the world. So tonight, as you listen, let this question sit gently in your mind. If time can move this slowly, how much have we missed simply by rushing through our own days? The Ice Age teaches us to soften our pace, to trust the long flow of things, to feel how even the coldest moments carry quiet meaning. And maybe, as we drift deeper into this story, the planet's frozen rhythm can help your own thoughts loosen, lengthen, and unwind. Let the question glow softly. How does a world this slow speak to us? And what does it ask us to remember? To understand what Earth looked like during the Ice Age, we first gently step back and see the planet not as a world in crisis, but as a world following one of its natural, ancient rhythms. Ice ages are not sudden winters or moments of frozen chaos. They are long, steady breaths in Earth's climate cycle. The planet cools little by little, almost imperceptibly, like a room growing quieter at dusk. Over tens of thousands of years, snow falls faster than it melts. Layer upon layer, it compacts into thick ice, spreading outward until entire continents wear a pale, shimmering coat. In this soft overview, imagine Earth from far above. The northern hemisphere gleams with enormous white domes, stretching from the Arctic down across Europe, Asia, and North America. Oceans pull back, revealing coastlines we don't recognize today. Winds drift across cold plains, shaping dunes of fine, icy dust. Forests contract and migrate south, forming dark ribbons against the bright white of frozen lands. Everywhere, the world breathes at a slower temperature. Life shifts, adapts, and settles into new rhythms. Animals grow thicker fur, move in different patterns, follow new paths across the land. Humans too find warmth where they can, gather near fire, follow the migration routes shaped by the cold. And above all of it, glaciers advance with the patience of mountains learning to walk. This is the Ice Age in its simplest, quietest form. Not a sudden freeze, but a planet moving into a different mood. Colder, slower, and beautifully transformed. As we continue, you won't need to hold on to details or dates. Just drift with the imagery, the textures, the pale light, and the wide, open silence of an Earth wrapped in frost. Let the world unfold at its own pace, inch by inch, like ice growing across a quiet lake. Imagine Earth during the height of the Ice Age, not as a planet of chaos, but as a calm, pale sphere moving through space with a quiet glow. From above, the continents seem softened, their edges blurred beneath enormous sheets of ice. These glaciers, some stretching more than 3 kilometers thick, rise like slow-moving mountains, their surfaces smooth and silent under the dim sun. They cover Canada, Scandinavia, Siberia, and much of northern Europe, turning vast regions into white plateaus that shimmer faintly in the cold light. Stand within that world for a moment. The air is crisp and thin. The horizon feels wider, emptier, and strangely peaceful. Snow doesn't fall in storms. It drifts almost weightlessly, settling in layers that have been building for centuries. Beneath your feet, the ice groans softly, shifting under its own immense weight in slow, unseen currents. The wind brushes across the frozen land like a long, steady breath, carrying tiny crystals that sparkle before disappearing into the whiteness. There is no rush here, no noise, no colour except the gentle blues and greys of a world illuminated by low winter sunlight. Even the sky looks different, paler, quieter, with clouds stretched thin like silk pulled across a lantern. And yet, despite the cold, the world is alive. Wolves move carefully across open plains. Mammoths travel in calm, deliberate groups, their footsteps leaving soft impressions in the snow. Small birds take flight only when needed, conserving precious warmth. Every creature is adapted to a life where the landscape itself seems to sleep. In this frozen scene, Earth feels almost like a dream, slow, graceful, and deeply serene. Everything is softened by snow, everything is shaped by patience, and everything moves with the quiet logic of ice advancing inch by inch. As you picture this world, let its stillness settle gently into your thoughts. Let the vast white calm wash over your mind, smoothing the edges of the day. In this place, the world is simple, cold, silent, and beautifully peaceful. During the Ice Age, the oceans did something quiet and astonishing. They breathed out. As immense volumes of water locked themselves into glaciers, sea levels around the world fell, slowly, steadily, almost gently, by more than 120 meters. It wasn't a sudden draining or a dramatic collapse. It was a long exhale, a gradual lowering of the global tide as the planet shifted into its colder rhythm. If you were standing on a coastline then, the world would look subtly but profoundly different. The shoreline would stretch far beyond where it lies today. Wide plains would unfold where modern beaches sit, revealing land that has been underwater for thousands of years. Islands we know now were once connected to continents, and continents themselves reached out farther into the ocean. Imagine walking across these exposed lands. Beneath your feet lies a seabed that has not yet learned the language of water. Small stones are scattered like forgotten memories of the waves. Channels shaped by ancient tides curve softly through the open space. Farther out, the ocean sits lower, quieter, held back by the cold breath of the Ice Age. These newly revealed landscapes weren't empty. They became important pathways, corridors for animals migrating across the world, and bridges that allowed early humans to travel into new regions. The Bering Land Bridge connected Asia to North America. Sunderland connected mainland Southeast Asia to islands that now stand apart. These were not narrow strips of land, but broad living worlds where grass swayed, herds moved, and fires glowed against the cold evening air. Even the sea itself seemed transformed. With the oceans pulled back, coastlines were sharper and tides gentler. The smell of salt hung in the air like a distant memory rather than a constant presence. Waves travelled longer distances before reaching land, curling softly as though hesitant to interrupt the stillness. The planet, reshaped by ice, carried a quieter rhythm, and in this lowered world Earth felt larger. Wider horizons, longer journeys, and space that existed only because the cold had gathered the oceans inward. As you imagine this, let your thoughts stretch out like those ancient coastlines. Let them drift into the open distance where land and sea once met, and breathe in the calm of a world reshaped by frost and time. During the Ice Age, the great northern forests, the deep ancient woodlands we know today, did not exist in the same places. The cold pressed them southward, gently but firmly, like a slow-moving tide of frost reshaping the land. Trees that now stand proudly in Canada, Scandinavia, and Siberia, instead grew hundreds or even thousands of kilometres below their modern borders. Imagine stepping into one of those forests. The air is cool but not frozen, filled with the faint scent of pine and the soft rustle of needles drifting to the forest floor. Tall conifers stand like quiet guardians, their trunks dark against the dim light of a colder sun. The forest feels denser, more compact, as if every tree has leaned in close to share warmth with its neighbours. The silence is deeper here, not empty, simply patient. Small footprints scatter across the frosty ground, deer moving carefully through the undergrowth, wolves passing through at dawn, birds fluttering just enough to conserve their strength. Each sound is softened by the cold, each breath a small cloud that fades into the still air. These forests formed a boundary between worlds. To the north lay vast sheets of ice, blank and unmoving. To the south stretched open grasslands and tundra, sweeping wide beneath pale skies. The forest lived between these extremes, neither frozen nor warm but suspended in a slow, quiet balance. The trees themselves grew differently, shorter, tougher, with branches adapted to the weight of winter snows. Their roots sank deep into cold soil, drawing what little warmth remained. Moss covered the ground in thick, soft layers, absorbing the footsteps of passing animals and creating a hush that felt almost sacred. In these displaced forests, life survived not by speed, but by stillness. Every creature conserved energy. Every movement had purpose. And in that calm, the forest felt alive in a measured, thoughtful way, like a place listening to the whisper of the ice approaching from the north. As you picture this ancient woodland, let its quiet steadiness settle over you. Let the shadows between the trees soften your thoughts. Let the cool air around the branches slow your breathing. This was the forest of the Ice Age, hushed, patient, and beautifully out of place, growing where warmth allowed and waiting for the world to shift once more. South of the great walls of ice, the world opened into vast tundra plains, endless, wind-brushed spaces stretching farther than the eye could follow. These were not empty deserts, but living, breathing ecosystems shaped by cold light and gentle winds. Imagine standing there, beneath a sky washed in pale silver. The land before you is wide and treeless, covered in soft grasses that bend easily under the touch of the breeze. Mosses and tiny flowering plants cling close to the ground, creating a delicate carpet of muted greens and browns. The air feels light, crisp, and clean, carrying the faint scent of frost and distant snow. In this open world, sound travels differently. The wind hums low, steady, and unbroken. The footsteps of animals seem to drift instead of strike. Herds of mammoths move across the plains at a patient pace, their fur swaying like slow waves as they search for patches of grass buried beneath thin layers of ice. Woolly rhinoceroses graze nearby, their massive shapes softened by the pale morning light. Even small creatures, hares, foxes, ground birds, move with a kind of gentle intention, their motions tuned to the quiet rhythm of the land. The tundra, though cold, holds a surprising warmth of life. Each plant is adapted to grow quickly during the short summers, bursting with colour and energy before the long winter returns. The soil stays frozen just beneath the surface, yet somehow life finds a way to flourish in the narrow window of sunlight each year. There are no tall trees or high cliffs to block your view. The horizon stretches outward like a slow breath, creating a sense of freedom that feels almost dreamlike. Above it all, the sky glows with a pure stillness, sometimes blue and bright, sometimes muted and grey, always calm, always open. This landscape shaped the journeys of animals and humans alike. Without forests or mountains to guide them, they followed the wind, the sun, and the steady migrations of herds across the plain. Footpaths formed through repeated movement, soft lines carved into the earth by countless generations searching for food, shelter, and warmth. The tundra was a world of patience, a world where survival depended on moving slowly, listening carefully, and respecting the vastness around you. As you picture these wide, ancient plains, let their openness spill gently into your mind. Let the endless horizons stretch your thoughts into softer shapes. Feel the calm of a world without walls, without hurry, without noise, just a quiet, flowing expanse of earth and sky, breathing together in the cold light of the Ice Age. During the height of the Ice Age, Europe looked nothing like the landscapes we recognise today. The continent lay beneath a great shimmering weight, vast glaciers extending from Scandinavia down into northern Germany, Poland, and parts of the British Isles. These weren't small sheets of frost, but towering walls of ancient ice, thick enough to swallow mountains, heavy enough to press the land beneath them into new shapes. Imagine walking toward this frozen frontier. The air cools step by step, each breath carrying the faint taste of snow and ancient cold. Far ahead, the horizon blurs into a pale brightness where land and glacier merge. The ice rises like a silent, unmoving sea, its surface cracked in gentle patterns, its edges sculpted by centuries of winter winds. There are no forests here, no rolling hills, no fields of green. Instead, the land is carved by the slow movement of ice, shaped into valleys and ridges that glint softly beneath the subdued sun. Massive boulders sit scattered across the plains, carried from faraway mountains by glaciers that drifted south like frozen giants. When the sun does appear, it hangs low in the sky, casting long shadows that stretch across the frost. Light bounces off the ice in muted blues and silvers, giving everything a dreamlike glow. The air is so still that even a single gust of wind feels like an event, brushing across the frozen ground, lifting tiny snow crystals into a ghost-like dance before letting them settle again. Yet within this cold world, life persists. Reindeer and musk oxen roam the open steppes south of the ice, moving slowly, deliberately, conserving energy as they graze on hardy grasses. Small groups of ancient humans navigate these lands as well, following the rhythms of the herds, their fires flickering in the dim evenings as they shelter near stone outcrops, or within caves protected from the frigid winds. Europe during the Ice Age was a continent caught in a long winter, harsh, yes, but full of quiet beauty. Its valleys were sculpted by ice, its cliffs shaped by freezing and thawing, its lakes carved from the retreating glaciers that would one day reveal the landscapes we know now. To imagine Europe then is to imagine a world slowed down to its simplest form, a world of cold light, open spaces and patient transformation. A world where each day unfolds with the unhurried rhythm of ice, advancing and retreating across the land. As you picture this ancient continent, let its frozen calm settle into your thoughts. Let the pale light soften the edges of your mind. The deep freeze of Europe wasn't only a time of cold, it was a long, quiet chapter in Earth's story, written in ice and silence. During the peak of the Ice Age, North America lay beneath one of the largest ice sheets the world has ever known, the Laurentide ice sheet, a frozen titan stretching from the Arctic deep into what is now the heart of the United States. To imagine this ancient landscape, picture a continent transformed into an immense, silent plateau of ice. Cities like Chicago, Toronto, Montreal, and New York did not yet exist, but the land beneath them was buried under glaciers more than 2 or even 3 kilometers thick. From above, the continent appeared softened, almost erased, its mountains subdued, and its plains hidden beneath a shimmering white expanse. If you stood at the base of this frozen wall, you would see a horizon dominated by pale blues and muted silvers. The ice rose like a continent within a continent, its edges fractured into high, frozen cliffs that creaked softly under their own weight. Every so often, deep within the glacier, pressure would shift, releasing a low, resonant groan that echoed across the quiet land. The world around it felt humbled by its presence. South of the ice, the landscape was cold but alive. Grassy steppes stretched outward where forests had retreated. Mammoths wandered in calm herds, stopping to brush snow aside with slow, sweeping motions of their trunks. Ancient bison moved in long lines across the frozen ground, leaving thin trails that wound toward the warmer regions. Farther east, near the Atlantic, the coastline looked entirely different. With sea levels much lower, land extended far beyond the modern shore, revealing plains where waves now roll. Rivers carved new paths through the cold earth, their waters flowing under thin layers of ice that cracked gently in the morning sun. Humans lived here too, but not in large camps or settled villages. Small groups followed the migrations of animals seeking food and shelter, while tending fires that glowed softly against the long, dark nights. They lived in a world shaped by wind and ice, where every journey was guided by the shifting of seasons and the slow, patient heartbeat of the frozen continent. When you picture North America during the Ice Age, Imagine a world quieted by cold, humbled by the weight of ice, and stretched wide under a sky of pale winter light. It was a continent in deep transformation, its rivers, lakes, and mountains being carved, pressed, and sculpted by forces too slow to see, but too powerful to ignore. As you hold this image in your mind, let the continent's frozen stillness drift gently into your thoughts. Let the calm of ice, ancient and unmoving, settle over you like a soft blanket of silence. During the Ice Age, rivers across the world moved with a slower pulse, as though the cold had persuaded them to rest. Many of them did not disappear, they simply changed their nature. Their surfaces froze into smooth glass-like sheets, while beneath the ice, water continued to flow in quiet, patient currents. Picture one of these ancient rivers. The morning light is pale, drifting across a surface frozen so cleanly that it reflects the sky like a long mirror laid gently on the earth. Snow gathers along the edges, softening every boundary, turning the riverbanks into gentle white slopes. Here and there, faint cracks stretch in delicate patterns, like frozen lightning captured in place. The sound of water is muted but present, a soft, steady hum that rises through the ice in low vibrations. Along the quieter stretches, the river barely moves at all, resting in shallow pools, growing colder each night as winter deepens. In some places, the ice grows thick enough to hide the water completely, creating the illusion of a river transformed into a silent, winding road of frost. Animals approach these frozen waterways with care. Mammoths tread slowly near the banks, using their heavy feet to test the ground before crossing. Wolves move with quiet precision, stepping lightly across the thinner edges, their breath drifting into the cold air like soft clouds. Even the smaller creatures, hares, foxes, ptarmigans, pause before touching the frozen surface, listening to the subtle groan of the ice adjusting beneath their weight. Farther north, rivers vanish entirely under deep snow, their courses marked only by gentle dips in the landscape. These buried rivers sleep through the long, cold months, waiting for the distant warmth of spring to awaken them. When summer arrives, short, bright, and fleeting, the rivers briefly return to life. Meltwater trickles down from glaciers, gathers speed, and rushes through the channels that had been quiet for most of the year. But even at their liveliest, Ice Age rivers feel different. Their flow is cooler, their waters clearer, their motion more restrained. They move with the patience of a world sculpted by frost. These frozen and half-frozen waterways shaped everything around them. They carved valleys, fed tundra grasses, guided migrating animals, and offered humans important landmarks for travel and survival. When we imagine the Ice Age, it's easy to picture only glaciers and snow, but the rivers tell another story, a quieter one. A story of movement slowed but never fully stopped. A story of water adapting to the cold, finding ways to keep flowing even when the world above it slept. As you hold this image in your mind, let the stillness of those ancient rivers drift gently into your thoughts. Let their slow, steady motion calm your own internal pace, like a quiet current beneath the surface of your breathing. During the Ice Age, even the sky carried a different kind of quiet. Sunlight reached the earth through colder air, filtered by fine particles of ice drifting high above the land. The result was a softer, paler glow, light that felt gentle instead of bright, calm instead of warm. Imagine standing on an open plain or at the foot of a glacier. The sun hangs low even at midday, its arc across the sky shallow and unhurried. Instead of sharp, golden rays, the light arrives like a faint wash of silver, spreading evenly across the landscape. Shadows stretch long and delicate, blurring at the edges as though the cold air smooths them into softer shapes. Clouds look different too. Thin layers of cirrus stretch like silk threads across the horizon, illuminated from behind by a glow that seems almost dreamlike. On some days, halos appear around the sun, rings of pale ice crystal light created as the sun's rays pass through frozen particles drifting in the upper atmosphere. These halos shimmer with soft whites and faint blues, turning the sky into something that feels both otherworldly and beautifully simple. Breathing in that air feels crisp and pure. Each inhale carries a sense of clarity, a freshness born from a world less crowded with moisture and heat. The atmosphere holds fewer layers of warmth, and so the sound travels farther. A distant call from an animal or the soft crunch of snow beneath a mammoth's foot lingers slightly longer before fading. At dawn, the horizon glows in muted colours, pinks washed with grey, gentle violets melting into pale blue. At dusk, the sky dims slowly, as though reluctant to leave the world in darkness. Even the stars feel sharper, their light cutting through the clear cold air with a precision rarely seen today. Nights are long, but they are never empty. The moon casts a quiet luminance over the snow, turning the ground into a soft, reflective surface that glows faintly with cool light. Sometimes, auroras ripple across the sky, more vivid than in warmer ages because the air is darker, clearer, and calmer. In the Ice Age sky, everything feels peaceful. Every colour is subdued, every light is gentle, every moment is softened by the cold. As you picture this pale sunlight drifting across frozen hills, let its quiet glow ease into your thoughts. Let it settle your breathing, dim your inner noise, and open a space in your mind that feels as wide and calm as that ancient sky. During the Ice Age, the winds carried a unique kind of power, not violent or destructive, but steady, persistent, and endlessly patient. With so much of Earth's water locked in ice, the exposed plains and lowered sea levels created vast open spaces where wind could travel without interruption. These winds didn't simply pass over the land, they shaped it, sculpted it, slowly, quietly, over tens of thousands of years. Imagine standing on one of those ancient plains. The air moves around you in a long unbroken sweep, cool and dry, picking up fine grains of dust left behind by retreating glaciers. With each season, the wind gathers these tiny particles, lifts them gently, and carries them across open ground. As the years pass, these grains settle into broad blankets of pale sediment, loess, forming soft hills and rolling mounds that still exist in parts of Europe, China, and North America today. These formations were not built in storms, they were built in whispers. Day after day, the wind brushed the land, smoothing its edges, shifting its textures, and laying down layers of fine earth as delicate as powdered snow. In colder regions, the wind flowed across the edges of glaciers, carving subtle lines into the ice, pressing patterns into the frozen surface, creating ridges and grooves that caught the low-angle sunlight in soft silver glimmers. Even deserts were shaped differently then. Without the warmth to lift moisture, some regions became dry and barren, allowing the wind to sweep across them with ease. It gently piled sand into dunes that shifted only slightly each year. Slow, quiet movements that left ripples frozen in time. Life adapted to this constant motion. Grasslands grew low and flexible, bending rather than resisting. Animals moved calmly against the breeze, their fur thick and heavy to guard against the cold dryness. Even early humans learned the language of the wind, using its direction to navigate open plains and listening to its tone to sense approaching storms. In the Ice Age, the wind was not an enemy, it was an artist, a quiet sculptor carving the face of continents with the softest tools nature could offer: dust, sand, ice, and time. And like all good artists, it worked with patience, no rush, no urgency, just endless drifting motion. As you imagine these ancient winds brushing across frozen ground, let their steady rhythm ease into your thoughts. Feel the soft movement, the long exhale of the earth, reshaping the world grain by grain and moment by moment. Let that slow, sculpting calm settle into your own breathing, smoothing the edges of your day the same way the wind once smoothed the land. During the Ice Age, glaciers were more than frozen giants. They were patient artists carving the face of Earth with a precision that no human hand could match. Moving slowly, almost imperceptibly, these rivers of ice-shaped mountains, valleys and lakes, in ways that still define our world today. Imagine standing at the edge of one of these ancient glaciers. It stretches before you like a frozen ocean, its surface rippled with gentle ridges formed by years of snowfall compressing into ice. At first glance it seems motionless, but deep within its body the glacier flows, just a few centimetres each day, pressing forward with the calm persistence of time itself. As it moves, the ice picks up rocks, gravel, and entire boulders, carrying them along like brushes dipped in stone. Every shift, every inch, every quiet advance etches new lines into the land. Valleys are deepened, cliffs are smoothed, hills are scraped down to their foundations. In some places the ice carves long, U-shaped valleys that open wide toward the horizon, gentle curves left behind when the glacier eventually retreats. Fjords, with their steep walls and deep waters, are born from this same slow artistry. Great lakes, like the ones in North America today, were shaped by basins gouged into the earth by ice that lingered for thousands of years. Even the scattered, rounded boulders found across plains and far from any mountain range are the signature strokes of this frozen artist. Glaciers carried them across continents, dropping them gently as the climate warmed, leaving behind reminders of journeys that spanned generations. Beneath the glacier, the landscape felt the weight of time. Rock was ground into fine powder, glacial flour that drifted through rivers, turning them a soft, milky blue. When the ice melted in summer, streams poured from its base, weaving new channels across the land. In winter, these channels froze again, capturing the delicate patterns of flowing water in thin layers of ice. All of this happened with no hurry, no forceful rush. Glaciers worked like sculptors who understood that beauty comes from patience. Press a little here, carve a little there. Return again, season after season, century after century, until the land transformed into a quiet masterpiece. As you imagine this vast artistry, let the thought of slow, steady creation bring ease to your mind. The glacier does not rush, and yet it reshapes continents. It does not push with violence, yet mountains bow before its passage. Let that calm, persistent motion soften your own pace. Let it remind you that change, meaningful, lasting change, often happens one gentle moment at a time. Among all the creatures of the Ice Age, mammoths were perhaps the most iconic. Gentle giants wrapped in thick coats of wool, moving slowly across the frozen landscapes like living symbols of endurance and calm. To imagine the Ice Age without them would be like imagining the ocean without waves. Picture a herd of mammoths making their way across a tundra plain. Their massive bodies sway with each deliberate step, heavy fur rippling gently in the cold wind. Snow collects on their backs, but they hardly seem to notice, insulated by layers of warmth built for a world far colder than ours. Their curved tusks gleam softly in the pale sunlight, sweeping through the frost-covered grass as they clear the ground to reach the food beneath. Around them the world is quiet. The only sounds are the muffled crunch of snow beneath their feet and the low, resonant rumble of their voices, deep, calming vibrations that carry across the open plains. Calves stay close to their mothers, sheltered beneath the shadow of thick legs and warm fur, learning how to navigate the cold light of this ancient world. Mammoths were not rushed creatures. They travelled slowly, migrating with the seasons, following patterns of vegetation that shifted with every change in temperature. Their movements shaped the land in subtle ways, paths formed by their repeated journeys, depressions left in the earth where they paused to feed or rest. These impressions, though soft, were part of the world's rhythm. Their presence brought life to the tundra. Wolves tracked them at a respectful distance, understanding that mammoths were powerful, but also knowing that the carcass of one that succumbed to the cold or age could feed an entire ecosystem. Birds followed the herds, searching for insects uncovered by their sweeping tusks. Even the plants benefited from the slow disturbance of the ground as mammoths dug through snow, aerating hard, frozen soil. In many ways, mammoths were caretakers of the Ice Age environment, maintaining balance simply by living within it, moving with it, and adapting to its slow, unchanging pace. Their calm strength made them symbols of resilience. They faced long winters, low sunlight, and shifting landscapes, and yet they continued step by step through the cold and silence. As you imagine these great creatures, let their quiet presence drift into your thoughts. Let their patient steps ease the pace of your own breathing. Let the gentle sway of their movements remind you that even in a world of frost, warmth can be carried within. The mammoths walked through an age of ice with steadiness and grace, and for a moment, you can walk beside them too. In the cold light of the Ice Age, another presence moved quietly across the land, sleek, powerful, and almost ghost-like against the pale horizon. The saber-toothed cats, with their curved fangs and muscular frames, were not the fierce monsters we sometimes imagine. In truth, they were patient hunters shaped by a world where energy had to be conserved, where every movement mattered, and where survival depended on calm precision rather than chaos. Picture one of these cats stepping through the frosty grasses at dusk. The sky glows in soft violet tones, and the air holds the sharp clarity of approaching night. Its paws press gently into the cold ground, leaving almost no sound, only faint indentations that catch the last traces of light. Its breath forms a small cloud that lingers for a moment before dissolving into the stillness. The cat pauses often, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. In the Ice Age, rushing wasted warmth. Every step is calculated, every motion quiet, every choice deliberate. Its eyes scan the open plains, reflecting the pale glow of the fading sun. In the distance, a small herd of grazing animals moves slowly across the tundra. The cat observes them with steady, patient focus, reading their patterns, waiting for the right moment. There is no hurry. Life in the cold rewards calm. These predators were beautifully adapted to their world. Their strong bodies allowed them to take down large prey, while their long fangs, so iconic, were tools designed for precision rather than brutality. Their fur, thick and layered, protected them from the relentless chill. Their muscles conserved heat and power, ready to release only when necessary, and yet, despite their strength, saber-toothed cats were creatures of subtlety. They preferred the edges of forests, the shadows of rock formations, the quiet places where the wind whispered soft patterns across the earth. They moved like shifting silhouettes, blending with the muted colours of their world. To early humans, they were not just predators. They were part of the landscape's quiet rhythm. People learned to respect their presence, to read their tracks, to sense their movement long before seeing them. Sometimes their paths crossed, and in those rare moments, both species understood that the Ice Age rewarded awareness and restraint more than confrontation. When you imagine these ancient cats, don't picture fear. Picture balance. Picture a creature perfectly tuned to its environment, moving with the grace of something that knows the value of silence. As you let their shadow drift through your thoughts, feel the calm intention in their steps, the quiet patience of their gaze, the softness of their presence in a world of frost and gentle light. They were part of the Ice Age's harmony, strong, quiet, and always moving just beyond the edge of dawn. Amid the vastness of the Ice Age, beneath pale skies, beside wandering herds, along frozen rivers, small groups of humans walked softly across the land. Their presence was humble compared to the great mammoths and towering glaciers, yet their quiet resilience helped shape the world that would one day become our own. Imagine a small band of early humans moving across a cold plain at dawn. Their fur-lined clothing rustles gently as they walk, stitched from the hides of animals they respected and depended on. Each step leaves a clear imprint in the frost, deep enough to mark their passing but light enough not to disturb the stillness around them. Their breath rises in small silver clouds that drift away like tiny ghosts of warmth. These people were not wanderers by choice. They were wanderers because the land required it. As seasons shifted, herds moved in search of food, and humans followed in slow, thoughtful migrations. They walked along riverbanks where the ice was thin, across open tundra where the wind was steady, and into sheltered valleys where the cold loosened just enough for fires to burn brighter. Survival in the Ice Age depended on cooperation. Families huddled together at night beneath animal skins, sharing warmth, stories, and embers carried carefully from one camp to the next. Their homes, simple shelters of bone, wood, and hide, glowed softly from within. Tiny islands of warmth against the immense cold. Fire was more than a tool. It was a companion. Its orange light flickered on cave walls, reflecting quiet moments of rest after long days of hunting and gathering. Sparks drifted upward like fleeting stars, mirroring the night sky outside where real constellations stretched clearer and sharper than we see today. During the Ice Age, humans saw their world not as harsh, but as meaningful. Every track on the ground told a story. The stride of a mammoth, the cautious steps of a wolf, the looping trails of small animals seeking food. People learned to read these signs the way we read words, understanding the language of the land through observation and patience. They respected the animals they depended on, offering gratitude in ways passed down through generations. Their tools, stone blades, bone needles, carved points, were crafted with care, shaped for tasks that required both strength and delicacy. As they travelled, humans left behind more than footprints. They carried memories, songs and lessons from one valley to the next. In sheltered caves, they painted scenes of hunts, herds and spirits, capturing the movement of life in strokes of ochre and charcoal. These images, still visible today, are echoes of their presence, reminders that even in an age of cold and silence, creativity flowed like a warm current through the human spirit. When you picture these ancient people, imagine their calm resilience, their steady footsteps, their quiet harmony with the frozen world around them. They moved not against the Ice Age, but with it, living in rhythm with the land, adapting to its moods, and carrying forward a lineage of patience and wonder. As their footsteps fade into the frost of your imagination, let their quiet strength settle gently into your thoughts, reminding you that even in the coldest times, warmth can be found in connection, intention, and the shared journey of life. As the Ice Age reshaped the continents, it also reshaped the journeys of life. Animals, humans, and entire ecosystems followed new routes, carved not by rivers or forests, but by the slow advance and retreat of ice. These pathways were not planned. They emerged naturally, like soft trails worn into the earth by repeated movement, guiding countless generations across the changing world. Imagine a vast landscape where glaciers form giant walls to the north, their cold presence steering every living creature southward. Herds of mammoths, bison, and reindeer learned these routes instinctively, following patterns in the land where food was plentiful and the winds were gentler. Over time, their paths became familiar lines stretching across the tundra, carved by thousands of slow, deliberate steps. Humans followed these same trails, not as conquerors of the land, but as students of it, reading the subtle cues left behind, tracks in the snow, broken stems in the grass, the direction of the wind, the scent of distant herds carried faintly through the cold air. Their migrations aligned with the seasons, tracing loops through valleys, across plains, and along frozen rivers that melted just long enough each summer to offer fresh water and new growth. And then there were the land bridges, vast expanses of earth revealed as sea levels fell. These bridges connected worlds that today stand separated by oceans. The Bering Land Bridge opened a pathway between Asia and North America, a broad corridor stretching hundreds of kilometres across what is now the Bering Sea. It wasn't a narrow strip, but a wide, living landscape where grasses swayed and animals roamed freely. Humans crossed it slowly, generation by generation, moving with the rhythms of the Ice Age rather than racing ahead. Sunderland rose in Southeast Asia, connecting the Asian mainland with islands like Borneo, Java and Sumatra. Australia linked to New Guinea. Britain connected to Europe. Everywhere the oceans withdrew, new routes appeared. Silent invitations for life to spread, adapt and evolve. These migration paths shaped much of human history. They determined where families settled, where fires were lit, where stories were shared beneath the stars. They guided early humans into unfamiliar lands and offered opportunities for learning, survival, and cultural growth. Nothing about these migrations felt rushed. Movement during the Ice Age was measured, careful, and deeply linked to the environment. People travelled at the speed of seasons, not the speed of ambition. A path wasn't just a route across the land. It was a thread weaving life into the fabric of Earth's shifting climate. As you imagine these ancient journeys, picture footsteps, human and animal, fading gently into the frost. Picture slow caravans of life drifting across the tundra, guided by instinct, memory, and the quiet wisdom of the land. Let these pathways soften your thoughts, reminding you that movement doesn't always mean haste. Sometimes it simply means flowing with the world, one calm step at a time. During the Ice Age, coastlines around the world carried a different shape, quiet, extended and unfamiliar to our modern eyes. With so much water locked in ice, the oceans pulled back, revealing wide stretches of land that today rest far beneath the waves. These frozen coasts were neither beaches nor cliffs in the way we know them now. They were soft, open margins where sea and land drifted gently toward each other in cold, muted harmony. Imagine standing at one of these ancient shorelines. The ocean sits far in the distance, lower and calmer, its waves rolling in with a hushed rhythm softened by the colder air. Between you and the water lies a broad plain of exposed seabed, flattened, rippled, and dusted with frost. Small stones scatter the ground like forgotten echoes of tides that once washed over them. Channels carved by ancient currents curve across the landscape in soft, winding patterns. In some places, ice forms delicate layers along shallow pools, turning them into glassy mirrors that reflect the pale sunlight. The air here feels different. The scent of salt is faint, almost shy, carried on a breeze that has travelled farther than it would in a warmer world. The cold presses the ocean into silence, reducing the roar of waves into something gentle like a faraway sigh. Along these coasts life adapted quietly. Seals and seabirds moved along the shifting boundary, finding food in the colder, nutrient-rich waters. Caribou and mammoths wandered close to the shore, grazing on hardy plants that clung to the exposed land. Humans followed, drawn to the combination of open plains, migrating herds, and coastal resources. Their footprints mixed with tracks of animals, forming soft trails across the frost-covered ground. Shelters built from driftwood, bone, and hide stood in small clusters, their fires glowing like warm stars against the long winter evenings. But some coasts were not open plains, they were edges of ice. In the far north, massive ice shelves extended far into the oceans, forming floating walls of blue and white. The sea cracked gently beneath them, creating deep, echoing sounds that carried across the still air. Where the ice met the water, soft mist rose, drifting across the surface like breath on a cold morning. Over thousands of years, these coastlines shifted with the rhythm of climate. As glaciers advanced, the sea retreated further. As the world warmed, the ocean crept back in, swallowing the plains and reshaping the boundaries once more. The frozen coasts of the Ice Age remind us that shorelines are never fixed. They are poems written by water and time, rewritten endlessly in cycles far slower than human memory. As you picture these ancient shores, let their calm quiet settle into your thoughts. Imagine the gentle meeting of frost and tide, the long stretch of exposed earth, the whisper of cold air moving across land once touched by waves. In this place the world feels open, patient and beautifully transformed. Beneath the tundra plains of the Ice Age, the ground held a quiet secret. Layers of earth that never thawed, even in the brief warmth of summer. This was permafrost, soil and ice fused together in a cold, ancient stillness that shimmered beneath the surface like a hidden memory of winter. Imagine kneeling beside a small patch of exposed ground. At first glance it looks solid and unremarkable, a mix of frozen soil and pale roots. But just a few centimetres below, the texture changes. The earth becomes dense, crystalline, almost glass-like. Tiny bubbles of ancient air, trapped thousands of years earlier, glint faintly within the ice. This frozen layer doesn't melt with the seasons, even when the sun climbs higher in summer and the surface softens into a thin layer of mud. The deeper ground remains locked in the cold, preserving a snapshot of climates long past. The permafrost stretches for thousands of kilometres across the northern continents, forming a silent foundation beneath the tundra. It is rich with stored stories, frozen plant material from ancient summers, preserved bones of small animals, and countless microscopic traces of life held in stasis. Every winter, snow blankets the land. Every spring, only the topmost layer thaws for a short, fleeting moment. But the deeper layers remain untouched, as if the earth itself is holding on to a memory it isn't ready to release. In some areas, the permafrost forms polygons, beautiful natural patterns etched into the ground. As the surface freezes and thaws, it cracks and buckles, creating geometric shapes that stretch across the landscape like ancient designs. From above, they look almost deliberate, as though drawn by a patient hand using the cold as ink. Animals move carefully across these frozen grounds. The soft crunch beneath their feet reveals the hardness below, a sound that tells them where the ground will support their weight and where the surface might give way. Humans, too, learn to read these signs, choosing stable places for shelters and storing food where the cold earth could preserve it. Permafrost played an unexpected role in shaping the Ice Age world. It limited plant growth but also protected roots. It slowed the flow of water but created shallow wetlands in summer where birds gathered. It hardened the ground but provided a cooling refuge for early humans who understood how to use the land's cold to their advantage. This shimmering layer beneath the tundra is more than frozen soil. It is a map of the past, layered year after year with the quiet record of seasons, storms, and ancient light. As you imagine this frozen earth beneath your fingertips, let its stillness sink into your thoughts. Let it remind you that some things unfold slowly, remain steady, and hold memories far longer than we ever could. The permafrost of the Ice Age was the planet's deep breath, cold, patient, and filled with the quiet weight of time. During the Ice Age, nightfall carried a different presence, softer, heavier, and longer than the nights we know today. The tilt of Earth's axis, combined with the colder atmosphere and the reflective weight of ice, created evenings that stretched slowly across the land. Darkness didn't rush in, it unfolded gently, like a long shadow drifting over a quiet, frozen world. Imagine standing on an open plain as the sun sinks toward the horizon. Its pale light dims gradually, spreading thin across the tundra, until the land glows with a faint silvery blue. The cold sharpens as the light fades. The air grows still and the world takes on a hushed, almost timeless quality. For a moment, Everything feels suspended between day and night, held in a peaceful, breath-like pause. As the sun slips below the horizon, the darkness deepens, but not all at once. It spreads slowly, giving your eyes time to adjust, revealing a sky that becomes clearer and sharper with every passing minute. In the Ice Age, the atmosphere held far fewer particles, and the cold air was crisp and clean. Stars shone with a clarity that seems almost impossible today. Constellations appeared bold and precise, their patterns etched against the dark sky like ancient stories written in light. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens in a broad, shimmering band, so bright it cast the faintest glow on the snow-covered ground. Under this sky, nights felt immense. Long hours passed with only the softest sounds, the low hum of wind brushing the tundra, the distant call of an animal, the quiet crunch of snow beneath cautious footsteps. Fires became small suns in the darkness, their orange glow forming circles of warmth where humans gathered to share food, guard their families, and tell stories shaped by the frozen world around them. For the animals of the Ice Age, night-time was a time of careful movement. Wolves padded across the plains in graceful lines, their eyes catching the starlight. Mammoths shifted gently in their sleep, exhaling soft clouds of steam that drifted upward like tiny offerings to the night sky. Even small animals, hares, foxes, snowy owls, moved with calm intention, guided by instincts refined over countless generations. These extended nights invited reflection, patience, and connection. With limited daylight, life adapted to the rhythm of long evenings. Tasks were completed by firelight, journeys were planned around the moon's glow, and beneath the vast dome of stars humans found comfort in the shared stillness, a reminder that even in the coldest times, the world remained full of quiet beauty. As you imagine these long nights, let their calm depth settle into you. Picture the clear sky stretching endlessly overhead, the slow swirl of stars, the gentle silence grounding the world. Let the thought of those lingering evenings soften your breath and slow your mind. The nights of the Ice Age were not fearful. They were soothing, spacious, and filled with a quiet light, all their own. In the deep cold of the Ice Age, the night sky often held a quiet gift, curtains of shimmering light that drifted across the darkness like slow-moving waves. The auroras were brighter then, more vivid, dancing above frozen continents with colours that seemed to breathe in the frigid air. With clearer atmospheres and long winter nights, these lights painted the sky with gentle strokes of green, blue, and faint pink, turning the world below into a silent stage for their luminous performance. Imagine looking up from a snowy plain as the first ribbons of light begin to appear. They rise from the northern horizon like pale ghosts, then stretch upward, rippling gently as though stirred by an invisible breeze. The air is still. The cold is deep, but not harsh. It carries a clarity that makes every movement in the sky feel close, intimate, as if the auroras are brushing their colours across the edges of your vision. As the lights brighten, they drift and curl, forming soft arcs that glow against the black canvas of night. Sometimes they appear as delicate veils fluttering quietly. Other times they gather into tall pillars that shimmer and fade like lanterns rising into the sky. Their movement is slow, rhythmic, almost meditative, perfectly matched to the calm pulse of the Ice Age world. For animals, the auroras were simply part of the night. Herds continued grazing in the dim light. Wolves paused during their evening journeys, watching the sky with calm, steady eyes. Birds settling into their shelters tilted their heads gently toward the shifting colours before tucking beneath their wings for warmth. For early humans, these lights were both mysterious and comforting. Families gathered outside their shelters to watch them drift through the sky. Fires crackled softly at their feet, reflecting orange light onto faces already glowing with the cold. Stories were whispered, tales of spirits, of ancestors, of creatures made of light, each shaped by wonder and passed through generations like embers carried from camp to camp. And above it all, the auroras continued their patient dance, unhurried by time or season. They stretched across continents, illuminating the snow with a soft, otherworldly glow. Their colours rippled along the edges of glaciers, reflected gently in frozen lakes, caught on the tips of icy ridges like threads of living light. The ancient sky felt larger beneath their presence, wider, softer, more alive. As you imagine this glowing panorama, let its calm movement flow into you. Picture the long arcs of light drifting across the heavens, the quiet hush of the frozen earth below, the slow breathing of a world wrapped in winter. Let the auroras settle your thoughts, just as they once settled the nights of countless beings who paused beneath their shimmering glow. In the Ice Age, the sky was not just a ceiling, it was a companion, a storyteller, a gentle guide through the longest, coldest nights. Hidden far below the frozen surface of the Ice Age world, where silence was deepest and sunlight never reached, enormous lakes lay cradled within the shadows of the glaciers. These subglacial lakes were worlds unto themselves, sealed off from the open air, untouched by seasons, and preserved in a darkness older than any human memory. They formed slowly, patiently, as pressure from the thick ice above pushed down on the land. The weight was immense, enough to warm the bottom layers of the glacier, just enough to melt a thin sheet of water. Over thousands of years, these sheets pooled into vast reservoirs, trapped beneath kilometres of ice, insulated from the world by a frozen ceiling that glowed faintly with filtered light. Imagine standing on the surface above one of these hidden lakes. To your eyes, the ground looks like a typical Ice Age glacier, smooth, pale, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Wind moves softly across the surface, brushing crystals of snow into gentle spirals. But deep below your feet, far beneath the silence, lies water older than any forest, any river, any civilization. Down there, the lake rests in perfect darkness. No waves, no ripples, no disturbances. The water is cold but still liquid, warmed faintly by the heat rising from Earth's interior. Its surface, unseen for thousands of years, is smooth and glass-like, holding the memory of untouched time. Around the lake's edges, sediments settle slowly. Grains of sand, traces of ancient life, particles carried by the glacier's deep currents. Layer by layer, these sediments build a quiet archive of everything the ice has moved across. Above it all, the glacier shifts in slow motion. Its enormous mass presses downward, but the lake absorbs the pressure like a cushion, allowing the ice to slide gently over it. This movement is almost imperceptible, happening at a pace so slow it feels like the glacier is breathing, exhaling in winter, inhaling in summer. These hidden lakes were not rare. Across Antarctica, where ancient ice still survives, and across the Ice Age world, hundreds of such lakes formed in silence. Some were small, the size of modern ponds. Others were enormous, stretching for dozens of kilometres beneath the frozen shield. Life, in its quiet persistence, may have existed in some of them. Tiny microbes, adapted to darkness and cold, could have thrived in these isolated pools, living in worlds without sunlight but rich in minerals and ancient water. In many ways, these subglacial lakes were like Earth's hidden heartbeats, slow, steady and enduring. They waited patiently beneath the cold, untouched by storms, seasons, or the passage of millennia. And although humans never saw them, their existence shaped the flow of glaciers, influenced the landscapes above, and quietly recorded the story of an Earth wrapped in ice. As you picture these secret lakes beneath the frozen world, Let their quiet depth settle into your thoughts. Imagine the stillness, the darkness, the unbroken calm resting far below the surface. Let the idea of this ancient hidden water soothe your mind, like a deep breath held softly beneath the weight of time. When we imagine the Ice Age, we often picture endless snow, frozen forests, and glaciers rolling across the land. But some parts of the world told a very different story. In certain regions, the cold didn't bring snow, it brought dryness. Instead of ice, these areas became vast, quiet deserts, where the wind carved gentle dunes, and the horizon shimmered with frost instead of heat. Imagine stepping into one of these frigid deserts. The ground beneath you is pale and crisp, a mix of frozen soil and fine, powdery dust. The air is cold enough to nip at your skin, but it carries almost no moisture. Snow is rare here, and when it does fall, it arrives in thin, delicate sheets that vanish quickly under the steady pull of the wind. The dunes rise in soft curves, shaped by icy breezes that move with patient hands across the open land. They ripple with subtle patterns, lines etched by countless winter gusts, frozen in place after months of quiet sculpting. Unlike warm deserts, there is no shimmering heat above them. Instead, the sky stretches wide and clear, washed in pale blues and gentle silvers. The sunlight feels distant, glancing across the dunes like a hesitant touch. These cold deserts existed on every continent touched by the Ice Age's breath. Central Asia held some of the largest, forming sprawling plains, where hardy grasses struggled to survive. Parts of North America and northern China turned equally dry, not because they were warm, but because the cold air could hold so little moisture. Even the edges of the great ice sheets became barren, not from heat, but from the relentless winds blowing off the frozen surface. Life here adapted quietly. Small rodents burrowed into the cold ground, creating tiny shelters where warmth could linger for a few precious hours. Foxes roamed in graceful arcs, their footsteps barely disturbing the soft crust of frost. Birds flew low, scanning the sparse land for movement. All of them survived not by outrunning the cold, but by moving in harmony with its stillness. To early humans travelling through these frozen deserts, the landscape must have felt otherworldly. No forest to break the wind, no mountains to offer shelter, only the slow rise and fall of dunes beneath a sky that seemed to stretch forever. Yet even here, people found paths carved by animals, pockets of vegetation along ancient riverbeds, and high dunes where they could watch the world unfold in quiet, uninterrupted horizons. These landscapes remind us that cold does not always mean snow and ice. Sometimes cold is simply emptiness, an open breath, a dry wind, a quiet land waiting patiently for seasons to shift. As you picture these frozen deserts, let their wide, open stillness settle gently into your thoughts. Let the soft dunes, the pale sky, and the calm space between wind and earth bring a sense of quiet expansion to your mind. In this strange corner of the Ice Age world, the silence is not lonely. It is spacious, gentle, and beautifully serene. Across the frozen world of the Ice Age, every living creature shared one simple, beautiful thing: the soft cloud of breath rising into the cold. In a landscape shaped by frost and silence, these drifting puffs of warmth became small, glowing signatures of life. They mark the presence of animals moving through the tundra, grazing across frozen plains, or sheltering beneath low shrubs as the winter light dimmed around them. Imagine watching a herd of ancient bison in the early morning. The sun is low, stretching a pale glow across the ground. With each exhale, a mist blooms briefly from their nostrils, silver clouds that hang in the air before dissolving into the stillness. Dozens of these soft bursts drift upward in unison, almost rhythmic, as though the entire herd is breathing in harmony with the land. Nearby, a woolly rhinoceros lowers its head to nudge aside a layer of frost, searching for hardy plants beneath the snow. Its breath emerges in thick, warm waves, spreading gently before fading into the cold. A few meters away, an Arctic fox sits quietly, ears perked, its breath forming tiny wisps that vanish almost as soon as they appear. Even small animals, barely visible in the vastness of the Ice Age plains, leave delicate traces of their presence. A hare darts through the snow, each hop punctuated by a faint burst of mist. A ptarmigan fluffs its feathers against the cold, sending a soft ring of warm air around its beak. These tiny moments reveal a simple truth. In a world dominated by ice, warmth was precious, and every creature carried a spark of it inside. For predators, breath was a subtle companion. Wolves travelling beneath the pale moonlight left long trails of drifting mist behind them, their breaths rising like soft signals in the dark. Before a hunt, they moved in near silence, their warm exhales the only visible sign of their presence. Even their prey, alert and listening, could sometimes spot these faint clouds before hearing any sound. Humans, too, added their breath to this frozen symphony. As they walked across the tundra in small groups, each person's exhale formed a momentary cloud of warmth that shimmered against the cold. Around their shelters at night, families gathered near the fire, their breath glowing softly in the firelight as they talked, planned, or simply listened to the wind moving outside. Breath became a symbol of connection, between humans, between animals, and between all forms of life that endured the Ice Age's long winters. Each visible exhale was a reminder that warmth survived within the cold, that life persisted even in the quietest corners of the frozen world. As you imagine these drifting clouds of breath, let the image soothe your mind. Picture the gentle rise and fall of warm mist against the pale horizon. Feel the calm rhythm of life moving through the cold, steady, and unhurried. Let the thought of those soft, fleeting breaths ease your own breathing now, slow, warm, and peaceful in the quiet of this moment. Around 20,000 years ago, the Ice Age reached its deepest breath, a moment we now call the last glacial maximum. It was the coldest point, the quietest point, the moment when ice covered its greatest extent, and the world felt suspended in a long, frozen stillness. If you could look at Earth from above during this time, you would see a planet wrapped in white. Great ice sheets spread across North America, Northern Europe, and Siberia, like vast, glittering continents of their own. Their surfaces glowed softly under pale sunlight, smooth in some places, fractured in others, rising in slow, frozen waves that stretched across the horizon. The sea levels had fallen dramatically, revealing lands that no longer exist, connecting regions now separated by deep oceans. Coastlines extended outward like long, gentle breaths of the continent. Rivers flowed through strange, unfamiliar paths. Winds carried cold air across the world, brushing every surface with a crisp, unwavering stillness. On the ground, life moved cautiously but calmly. Mammoths roamed in deliberate herds, using their sweeping tusks to uncover food beneath layers of frost. Reindeer clustered together, migrating along ancient routes that curved across tundra plains and around towering walls of ice. Wolves followed at a respectful distance, their movements guided by instinct and patience rather than urgency. Humans lived in small communities, carefully choosing where to build their shelters. They sought out valleys where the wind softened, cliffs that offered protection, and places where migrating animals passed regularly. Their fires glowed warm against the cold nights, tiny points of amber light scattered across a vast frozen land. They crafted tools from stone and bone, stitched clothing from thick hides, and painted stories on cave walls, pictures of herds, hunts, stars, and dreams. In this moment of deepest cold, Earth felt strangely peaceful. The glaciers were immense, but they moved slowly, creeping forward like patient tides. The air was crisp and clear, the nights long and luminous under the glow of the moon and the sharp brilliance of Ice Age stars. Even the silence carried a softness, as though the world were resting in a deep winter sleep. Yet within this frozen tranquillity, change was already beginning. Far to the south, temperatures had started to rise almost imperceptibly. The glaciers, though massive, were nearing a turning point. The world was shifting, preparing for a new chapter, one where the ice would slowly retreat, where rivers would swell again, and where plants would reclaim the land. But during the last glacial maximum, none of that was visible yet. The Earth was still in its coldest chapter, breathing slowly beneath its shimmering coat of ice. As you imagine this moment, let the deep calm of the frozen world drift into your thoughts. Let the stillness of the land, the softness of the light, and the slow, steady presence of the glaciers ease the pace of your mind. This was the world at its quietest, at its coldest, at its most patient, a reminder that even in the deepest winter, the Earth holds a gentle kind of peace. After tens of thousands of years of deep cold, the Earth began to warm, but not suddenly, not in bursts or shocks. The warming of the Ice Age was a long, gentle rise, a gradual softening of the planet's frozen breath. It unfolded so slowly that no creature alive at the time would have sensed the change from one year to the next. Yet over centuries the shift became undeniable. Imagine the world as this warming quietly begins. The glaciers, once steady and unbothered by time, start to soften at their edges. Small pools of meltwater form in shallow depressions, shimmering like tiny mirrors on the vast white surface. During the day, sunlight feels just a little stronger, still pale, still cold, but with a touch of warmth returning to its glow. At night, temperatures remain frigid, but not quite as unforgiving as before. Across the tundra, plants respond first. Hardy grasses push up earlier in the short summers, their green blades catching the faint warmth. Wildflowers bloom where none had grown for generations, adding brief sparks of colour to the muted landscape. These small changes ripple outward. Animals adjust their migrations, lingering a little longer in certain valleys, moving north earlier than before. Mammoths find new patches of grass exposed by melting frost. Reindeer follow the shifting line of vegetation, guided by instincts shaped across countless seasons. Humans, too, sense the difference. Fresh water becomes more abundant in the warmer months as streams swell with meltwater. Valleys once choked with ice open into broad, fertile plains. Families revisit old routes and discover new ones, following the land as it reshapes itself year after year. And still the warming continues, quiet, persistent, patient. The glaciers begin to retreat. What once seemed immovable now shrinks inch by inch, revealing rocky ground that hasn't seen sunlight for tens of thousands of years. Meltwater cascades down their sides, carving channels through ancient ice, singing soft, trickling songs that had been silent for too long. Lakes form where depressions in the land fill with melting glacial water. These lakes glow with a milky blue tint, carrying the fine sediment known as glacial flour, tiny fragments of rock ground smoothed by the ice's long passage. The world brightens as the ice pulls back. Forests begin migrating northward, following the warming seasons. Trees reclaim land that had long been frozen, their roots exploring soil that has finally thawed. Birds return in greater numbers, filling the sky with wings and quiet calls. Even the wind changes. It carries a new softness, a touch of warmth that travels slowly but steadily across the plains. The sharp, icy edge that once defined its every breath fades into something gentler. This slow warming marks the beginning of the end of the Ice Age. Not a dramatic or fiery shift, but a gradual reawakening. A rising tide of life, colour, and movement returning to the land after a long winter sleep. As you imagine this transition, Let it settle calmly into your thoughts. Picture the ice retreating with grace, the land breathing again beneath the sun, the world loosening its long-held chill. Let the softness of this change remind you that transformation often begins quietly, warming one small moment at a time. As the great ice sheet softened and pulled back, the world entered a time of flowing water, a gentle but powerful awakening that reshaped the land in ways both subtle and immense. What had once been frozen rivers began to stir beneath the growing warmth. Their quiet under-ice currents strengthened, pushing against the thinning layers of frost until, at last, channels opened and water began to run freely again. Imagine standing by one of these newly awakened rivers. The air is still cool, yet alive with the gentle murmur of meltwater slipping over stones. The river is a pale, milky blue, coloured by the fine powder of rock, glacial flour, carried down from the melting ice. Sunlight glints off its surface in soft flashes, like tiny sparks of warmth welcoming the changing world. These rivers didn't simply return, they grew. Fed by enormous amounts of melting ice, they swelled far beyond their ancient banks. Each day, more water surged into them, giving them a quiet strength that slowly carved deeper paths into the land. The sound of their flow became one of the first true voices of the warming earth, a steady, calming rhythm spreading across valleys and plains. But the water did more than fill rivers. It pooled in huge depressions left behind by the retreating ice, forming massive lakes unlike anything we see today. Some stretched for hundreds of kilometres, glowing blue beneath the pale sky. Others grew silently behind natural dams of ice and sediment. These lakes were beautiful and powerful. As they expanded, their weight pressed heavily against the fragile barriers holding them in place, and sometimes, with no warning, the walls gave way. When this happened, entire landscapes changed in a single moment. Water burst forward in enormous floods, rushing across the land with tremendous force. These were not violent in the sense of chaos. They were natural, inevitable releases of pressure built over millennia. The floods carved new valleys, deepened river channels, and created winding networks of streams that still shape the modern world. One such event, known now as the Missoula floods, sent waves as tall as skyscrapers sweeping across western North America. They sculpted canyons, left behind giant ripple marks, and formed the strange, beautiful landscapes we now call the channeled scablands. Yet even these powerful moments carried a kind of quiet logic. The earth was simply adjusting, balancing, releasing what had been held too long in the cold. For the animals living through this time, the changing waterways created new opportunities. Herds followed the rivers into freshly exposed valleys rich with young vegetation. Birds nested along the new lake shores, finding safety in the marshes that formed around them. Humans, too, adapted gracefully. They travelled along the swelling rivers, using them as guides through unfamiliar terrain. They fished in the new lakes, collected plants growing along the fertile banks, and built shelters near the fresh water that signalled hope and renewal. The melting rivers and bursting lakes marked the Earth's slow shift from an age of ice to an age of flowing life. Every stream, every flood, every expanding lake was part of a long, gentle transition, a world warming not with fire but with water. As you imagine these waters rising and moving across the land, let their calm persistence flow into your thoughts. Feel the quiet strength of rivers returning to life, the peaceful release of ice giving way to liquid light, the soft rhythm of a planet slowly learning to breathe warmth again. As the ice age softened and warmth crept slowly back across the land, some of the great creatures that once defined this frozen world began to fade. The mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats, beings that had endured thousands of winters, now faced a world that no longer matched the environment they had evolved to survive. Their decline wasn't sudden. It was slow, gentle in its pace, almost like a long sigh released into the warming air. Imagine watching a herd of mammoths standing on a hillside as spring arrives earlier than it did a generation before. The snow melts faster, plants sprout sooner. The tundra, once familiar and wide, begins to change into forests of shrubs and young trees. For the mammoths, the open plains they depended on grow smaller each year. Food becomes harder to reach. Competition increases. They adapt as best they can, moving northward where the cold lingers, but the world they knew is shrinking. In another part of the land, a saber-toothed cat pauses in tall grasses where once there had been snow. Its thick fur, once perfect for enduring long winters, now traps heat. The prey it once hunted, slow, cold-adapted animals, begin moving differently, finding new habitats, changing with the climate. The cat watches the shifting world with calm intelligence, but adaptation takes time, and the warm seasons arrive faster than its lineage can adjust. Humans too play a role, though not with malice. As they grow more skilled in hunting, crafting tools, and forming communities, their presence influences the balance of ecosystems already stressed by changing temperatures. The giants must navigate both the changing land and the increasing presence of humans sharing the same resources. In some valleys, the last of the woolly rhinoceroses stand quietly in the morning fog, their breath rising in soft waves. Their numbers are few, but they move with the same ancient grace that carried them through countless Ice Age storms. These creatures didn't disappear in a single moment. They slowly dimmed, each generation smaller in number, each year bringing new challenges from a world turning warmer, greener, and more complex. Their passing was quiet, almost gentle, more like a long winter ending than a sudden extinguishing. And yet, they left behind echoes, bones preserved in the ground, stories painted on cave walls, and ice-locked carcasses that still carry the memory of their time on Earth. Their shapes remain in our imagination, large, steady, powerful beings who lived in harmony with a colder world. As you picture their final chapters, let the softness of their departure settle into your thoughts. These giants did not vanish with violence or fear. They simply stepped out of a world that had shifted away from their ancient rhythm. Their dimming is a reminder that life moves through cycles, some beings rising as others gently fade. And just as the Ice Age made room for new forests, new animals, and new possibilities, the memory of these giants continues to drift through time, quiet and enduring. As the world continued to warm and the glaciers slowly retreated, the Earth began a gentle transformation, from white, open tundra back into a land of green. Forests that had once been pushed far to the south during the deepest cold now began the long journey back toward their ancient homes. This migration was not sudden. It was as slow and steady as the melting of the ice itself. Imagine standing on a hillside watching the landscape shift across centuries. At first, shrubs appear, small pockets of hardy willows and birches rising along the edges of the thawing plains. Their leaves catch the new warmth of the sun, trembling in breezes that no longer carry the sharp bite of deep winter. As the summers grow slightly longer, these shrubs thicken, forming patches of low woodland. Grasses grow taller, wildflowers bloom in colours the tundra had not seen for tens of thousands of years. Little by little the ground darkens with richer soil, fed by the return of plant life. The change continues, almost imperceptibly, until young forests begin to take root. First come the cold, tolerant species, spruce, pine, birch, testing the newly thawed earth with delicate roots. They grow slowly but with purpose, rising inch by inch each year. Eventually, these pioneers become tall enough to cast shadows on the ground. Birds return to nest among their branches. Small mammals scamper across the forest floor, finding food and shelter where once there had only been frost. As centuries pass, the forests march northward, following the retreating ice. What had once been open tundra transforms into deep woodlands humming with life. Rivers now lined with trees flow more gently, their banks held firm by roots weaving into the soil. Animals that prefer shelter and shade replace those adapted to endless plains. Deer move quietly among the trunks. Bears seek berries in summer. Wolves navigate the soft light beneath the canopy. Humans, too, adapt to this changing world. They follow the forest's advance, learning new sources of food, new materials for tools, new patterns in the land. They gather wood for shelter, hunt animals that thrive in the forest shade, and discover edible plants that flourish in the newly fertile ground. With the return of trees comes the return of sound, a rustling that replaces the quiet hush of wind over frozen grass. Leaves murmur in the breeze, branches sway in slow, graceful arcs. Rain falls more often now, its gentle patter a soft counterpoint to the distant calls of animals settling into the reborn ecosystem. The world becomes quieter in a different way, not from emptiness, but from balance. A calm equilibrium spreads across the land as warmth and life take root again. The march of the forests reminds us that nature is patient. It returns when the time is right, following rhythms older than memory and deeper than fear. As you picture these forests reclaiming the land, let their steady growth soothe your mind. Imagine the slow rise of trunks, the soft spread of branches, the gentle return of green after thousands of years of white. Let that image settle into you like a small seed, quiet, steady, full of calm possibility. As the glaciers melted and the world warmed, Earth began to reclaim the water it had loaned to ice for tens of thousands of years. The oceans, which had breathed out during the coldest ages, now breathed back in. Slowly at first, then with growing confidence, the sea levels began to rise, centimetre by centimetre, year by year, reshaping the outlines of continents and returning to shores that had long been dry. Imagine standing on one of those once exposed coastal plains, where frost had once clung to the ground, and mammoths had wandered beneath pale skies. The land stretches outward in a gentle slope, dotted with grasses and scattered stones left behind by ancient tides. For generations, humans and animals walked across this open world, unaware that it was only a temporary gift from the cold. Now, as the climate warms, you notice a change. The sea, once distant, begins to creep closer. At first it feels subtle. The waves arrive a little farther inland, pools form where the ground dips slightly, and the salty scent grows stronger on the breeze. Birds circle above new wetlands forming along the coast, exploring the places where land slowly yields to water. As centuries pass, the rising oceans become undeniable. The ancient plains vanish beneath shimmering blue. Land bridges that once connected continents disappear beneath gentle waves. The Bering Land Bridge sinks back into the sea, closing the pathway between Asia and North America. Sunderland, once a vast extension of Southeast Asia, dissolves into the waters that now form Indonesia's thousands of islands. Valleys become bays, hills become islands. Rivers find new routes, adjusting to the expanding seas with quiet persistence. Forests growing near the coast retreat inland as saltwater creeps into their roots. Animals adapt by shifting territories, following the land as it reshapes itself. Humans learn to move with the water. Villages near the shore relocate to higher ground. People discover new food sources along the rising coasts. Fish in newly formed shallows, shellfish gathering along soft tidal flats, birds nesting in expanding marshlands. Though some places disappear beneath the waves, new ecosystems flourish in their place, estuaries rich with life, tidal wetlands filled with reeds and bird song, shallow bays glowing with soft morning light. The rising oceans are not violent. They move with patience, guided by the slow melt of distant ice. Each generation sees only a small change, a shoreline shifting a little farther inland, a familiar path growing soggy in spring, a favourite hunting ground transformed into a lake. And yet, over thousands of years, these small changes add up to a world transformed. Coastlines settle into the shapes we recognise today, sculpted by the steady return of the sea. As you picture these waters rising, let their gentle advance ease into your thoughts. Imagine the calm persistence of the tide, reclaiming land with a soft, steady touch. The world is shifting, but not in haste. It is simply returning to balance, letting warmth reshape the places where cold once ruled. Let that image remind you that even the largest changes begin with quiet movements, flowing forward one peaceful moment at a time. Long after the Ice Age retreated, the land continued to whisper its story, not in words, but in the quiet marks left behind. Stone, soil, and mountains carried memories etched into their shapes, silent reminders of the world that once lay beneath miles of frozen weight. Even today, if you walk through certain valleys or along certain cliffs, you can trace the gentle scars of ancient glaciers, like fingerprints left by time itself. Imagine standing in a wide, U-shaped valley carved smooth by a slow-moving river of ice. The walls rise steeply on either side, polished and rounded, as though sculpted by an enormous, patient hand. At your feet, a stream trickles through the centre, small and delicate compared to the massive glacier that once flowed in its path. Its soft murmur is the echo of a force now long gone. Follow the valley downward and you might find scattered boulders, huge stones that seem out of place, sitting alone in fields or perched on hillsides. These are glacial erratics, carried across continents by ice and left behind when the world warmed. Their presence is quiet but profound. They are travellers from faraway mountains, delivered gently by the retreating glaciers like forgotten gifts from another age. Lakes also carry this memory. Many of the world's great lakes, Superior, Michigan, Baikal, were shaped by glaciers carving deep basins into the land. When you look across their calm waters today, you're gazing into spaces once filled with slow, grinding ice. Even small ponds tucked between hills can be marks of the Ice Age, formed from chunks of leftover ice buried beneath soil and later melting into depressions known as kettle lakes. In rocky places you might see long scratches, striations etched into stone by rocks trapped within a glacier's base. These lines run in parallel, like the strokes of a careful brush, pointing in the direction the ice once travelled. You might run your fingers over them and feel the faint grooves, a connection across thousands of years to the frozen forces that shaped them. Moraines, ridges of gravel and stone, trace the edges where glaciers paused during their retreat. They form gentle arcs across the land, marking ancient boundaries, like the footprints of ice taking slow steps backward. Everywhere the Ice Age touched, it left subtle reminders. Not dramatic monuments, but quiet signatures, shapes of valleys, patterns in soil, the way rivers curve, the angle of certain slopes. The earth carries its history lightly, but it carries it well. As you imagine these markers scattered across the world, let the thought of ancient ice resting within stones settle peacefully into your mind. These memories in the landscape are reminders that even the mightiest forces leave behind soft traces. They linger not to overwhelm but to whisper. The world has changed before, slowly, gracefully, and with enduring beauty. The earth is not just a place we live. It is a quiet keeper of memories, carrying traces of every age it has ever passed through. Long after the Ice Age thawed and warmth returned to the continents, the planet continued to hold its history in delicate layers, like pages of a book written in stone, soil, ice, and air. These records are subtle, but they endure, reminding us that nothing is ever truly lost. It simply settles deeper into the world's long, patient memory. Imagine holding a small core of ice taken from Antarctica or Greenland. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a frozen cylinder. Clear, cold, and simple. But inside, tiny bubbles of ancient air are preserved, trapped thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years ago. Each bubble is a perfect time capsule, containing the breath of a world that once lay under deep frost. Scientists can listen to these bubbles, deciphering the rhythms of temperature, sunlight, and atmosphere from ages we can only imagine. In sediment layers at the bottom of lakes and oceans, the memory continues. Thin bands of mud and sand settle year after year, stacking quietly like soft pages. Some layers carry the fine dust blown from Ice Age deserts. Others hold fragments of pollen from plants growing along the shifting forest lines. Together, they form a gentle timeline, a record of seasons, storms, and the long transition from frozen plains to forests rich with life. Even the rocks themselves remember. Minerals change their structure in response to ancient climates. Caves fill with slow-growing formations, stalactites and stalagmites, that hold chemical traces of rainfall from thousands of years past. These small details reveal patterns of drought, warmth, cold, and renewal. The planet remembers not with words, but with shapes and chemistry and quiet layers of a time. In the rings of old trees, the memory continues. Ancient trunks hold thin bands from years of hardship and thick bands from years of growth. Even trees that sprouted after the Ice Age still carry echoes of the climate cycles shaped long before they emerged. Rivers, too, remember. Their paths reflect the way glaciers carve through the earth. Their curves trace lines set long before humans learned to walk. Every bend, every tributary, every valley holds a hint of the cold hands that shaped them. And perhaps the most remarkable memory is in the DNA of the animals and plants around us. Each species carries tiny adaptations, inherited from ancestors who learned to survive in the cold light of the Ice Age. Thick coats, seasonal migrations, the instinct to store food. These habits linger and surprise in places, gentle reminders of a world that once demanded them. Everywhere you look, the earth holds quiet echoes of its frozen past. Not loudly, not insistently, just gently, like a story whispered beneath layers of time. As you imagine this vast memory woven into the planet, let its calm presence settle into your own thoughts. The world remembers not to cling to what was, but to honour the flow of what has been. It teaches us that change leaves traces, that time moves in cycles, and that nothing truly disappears. It simply becomes part of a deeper, quieter whole. Let that thought rest within you like a soft imprint on the surface of your mind. Long before humans understood seasons, calendars, or years, the earth followed its own quiet rhythms, vast, slow patterns that guided the coming and going of ice ages. These rhythms were not sudden or dramatic. They unfolded over tens of thousands of years, shaped by gentle shifts in the planet's orbit, the tilt of its axis and the subtle wobble in its rotation. Together, these cycles acted like a cosmic metronome, setting the pace of Earth's long breath between cold and warmth. Imagine watching the Earth from far above, drifting through space in its steady journey around the Sun. Over time, the shape of its orbit changes, a little more circular, then a little more stretched. The tilt of the planet leans slightly more toward the Sun, then slightly away. These changes are tiny on a human scale, almost invisible year to year, but across millennia, they reshape the balance of sunlight across the globe. In some eras, summers grow just warm enough for winter snow to melt completely. In others, the summers are too weak, allowing snow to linger, pile, and eventually compress into glaciers. The Ice Age rises and falls in step with these quiet celestial motions. You could think of it as a long, slow heartbeat of the planet. Glacial ages are the inhale, cold settling over continents, ice rising like breath filling a chest. Interglacial times like the age we live in now are the exhale, warmth returning, ice retreating, oceans rising, forests spreading. The rhythm is ancient, steady, and patient. Nothing about it is rushed. Nothing about it is erratic. It is a dance between earth and sun, conducted over spans of time so vast they make human history feel like a single soft footstep in the snow. Even the atmosphere plays along. When ice grows, carbon dioxide levels fall, cooling the world further. When ice melts, the oceans release this trapped gas back into the sky, warming the planet once more. It is a feedback loop of breathtaking delicacy, a system built not on sudden decisions but on slow, mutual adjustments. Life learned to move with this rhythm. Animals evolved to migrate, hibernate, adapt, and endure. Plants grew thicker or thinner, spreading seeds across lands reshaped by warm and cold spells. Early humans found new paths each time the climate shifted, learning to read the signs of change in the sky, the soil, and the behavior of animals. The Earth's climate has never been completely still. It pulses with a quiet tempo, warming, cooling, expanding, contracting. These cycles do not rush. They unfold like the turning of pages in an enormous ancient book. As you imagine this rhythm, let its slow steadiness calm your thoughts. Picture the earth moving through its long cycles with grace, breathing in cold, breathing out warmth, following a pattern older than mountains and deeper than any memory. Let the knowledge of this gentle flow remind you that the planet moves in its own time, and that not all change is abrupt. Some of it happens softly, quietly, like the slow drift of seasons in a world made of ice and light. Even in the deepest cold of the Ice Age, life did not pause. It shifted, transformed, and adapted in ways both subtle and extraordinary. Across the frozen continents, every species, plants, animals, even the smallest organisms, adjusted to the changing world with quiet creativity. Each adaptation was like a thread woven into a vast tapestry of survival, resilience, and patient ingenuity. Imagine a tundra hillside dotted with hardy plants. Their stems are small, their leaves close to the ground, shaped not to gather height, but to conserve warmth. Tiny hairs cover their surfaces, trapping thin layers of air like miniature blankets. When the short summer arrives, they bloom quickly, bursting into colour for just a brief moment before the long cold returns. These plants, humble and low, carry within them the wisdom of millions of years, strategies perfected through endless cycles of ice and thaw. Animals adapted with equal brilliance. The great mammoths grew thick layers of fat beneath dense coats of fur, creating natural insulation against the relentless cold. Musk oxen evolved a warm undercoat so fine and soft that no wind could penetrate it. Arctic hares changed their fur with the seasons, turning from brown to white so they could disappear into winter's quiet palette. Even predators adjusted. Wolves developed strong lungs and long legs to travel vast distances across open plains in search of prey. Saber-toothed cats honed their patience and precision, using strength sparingly in a world where energy was too precious to waste. Birds adapted by changing their migration routes, some travelling farther to find food, others staying in place, evolving beaks and feathers suited for colder climates. Insects, seemingly fragile, developed antifreeze compounds in their bodies that allowed them to survive freezing temperatures without harm. Beneath the soil, microorganisms entered dormant states, waiting patiently for the brief warmth of spring. And deep within frozen lakes and seas, tiny creatures drifted beneath the ice, protected by the water's steady temperature and shielded from the harsh winds above. Humans adapted too, not through fur or claws, but through creativity and community. They learned to sew warm clothing from animal hides, to build shelters that trapped heat, to store food during the short summers, and to follow the migrations of animals that guided their survival. They crafted tools perfectly suited for the cold, long spears, strong bindings, and curved blades for scraping hides. They discovered the power of firelight in darkness, using it not only for warmth, but for cooking, storytelling, and comfort. And just as other species changed their shapes, humans changed their minds, expanding their memory, their imagination, their ability to learn from the land. Each adaptation, from the smallest insect to the largest mammoth, from a blade of grass to a human family gathered around a fire, was a quiet triumph. Together, these countless adjustments formed a mosaic of resilience that allowed life not merely to endure the Ice Age but to flourish within it. As you picture these adaptations unfolding across the frozen world, let their quiet brilliance settle into your thoughts. Life survived by moving slowly, thinking carefully, and trusting the long rhythm of the earth. Let that sense of patient strength drift into you now, soft, steady, and full of enduring calm. When we look back at the vast sweep of the Ice Age, we often see a world defined by cold, struggle, and transformation. But beneath all of that, beneath the glaciers, the migrations, the long winters and short summers, the Ice Age carries a deeper lesson. That change, even the greatest kind, can happen slowly, gently, and with profound beauty. The world didn't freeze overnight. It cooled in delicate increments, following rhythms older than memory. Snow fell, melted, fell again, and slowly accumulated into ice thick enough to shape continents. Forests didn't flee in panic. They drifted southward over centuries, following the soft nudge of temperature and sunlight. Animals didn't vanish abruptly. They adapted, adjusted, and moved along ancient paths carved by instinct and resilience. Imagine watching the planet shift not in moments, but across millennia. Every transformation unfolds like the turning of a slow, heavy page. Landscapes stretch, contract, and stretch again. Coastlines expand and retreat. Rivers carve new paths. Life moves with the world, not against it. And all of it happens with patience. In the Ice Age, the Earth teaches us that change is not always urgent. Often, it is a quiet unfolding, like frost forming on a window or snow gathering on a sleeping hill. Even the retreat of the glaciers, a monumental shift, happened inch by inch, breath by breath, allowing forests to return, animals to adapt, and humans to discover new ways of living. The ice also teaches us about acceptance. The mammoths did not resist the cold. They grew coats to welcome it. The wolves did not fight the open tundra. They learned to roam widely. Early humans did not collapse under the weight of winter. They built fires, crafted tools, and followed the land as it changed. Their resilience did not come from denying change, but from embracing it with curiosity and courage. In this way, the Ice Age reflects something deeply human. We, too, live through seasons of transformation, times when familiar landscapes in our lives shift, when certain paths close and new ones emerge. Sometimes warmth returns slowly. Sometimes cold stays longer than we expect, but just like the Earth, we move forward in small steps, adapting, learning, and finding meaning even in the quietest changes. Imagine the glacier's long retreat, a reminder that progress does not always look like sudden breakthroughs. Sometimes it looks like steady softening, gradual release, gentle motion. Sometimes it looks like patience rewarded. And when the ice finally melts, the land beneath it is richer, more fertile, ready for new life. As you hold this thought in your mind, let it ease any heaviness in your heart. Let it remind you that change does not need to be rushed, feared, or forced. It can unfold gently. It can carry beauty. It can lead to unexpected growth. The Ice Age shows us that the world endures cold not by resisting it, but by flowing through it, trusting the long rhythm of time. Let that rhythm soothe you now, a quiet assurance that transformations in your own life can find their way, slowly, steadily, like ice melting into rivers, like winter giving way to spring. Through every chapter of the Ice Age, the Earth revealed a kind of strength that didn't roar or demand attention. It was not the strength of storms or earthquakes or blazing heat. It was something softer, steadier, an endurance woven into the planet's very bones. Beneath the glaciers, beneath the shifting winds, beneath the migrations of animals and humans, the Earth held its shape with a patience that feels almost comforting when we pause long enough to notice it. Imagine placing your hand on a smooth boulder left behind by a glacier thousands of years ago. It sits quietly in a field, touched by sun, rain, and seasons long after the ice retreated. That stone has travelled farther than most creatures ever will, carried gently across continents by a slow-moving river of ice. And yet, despite its journey, it rests now in stillness, embodying both movement and calm. That is the strength of Earth. Not force, but persistence. During the Ice Age, continents shifted ever so slightly under the weight of ice. The crust flexed, sinking where glaciers pressed down, rising again as the ice melted. Mountains weathered into new shapes, valleys stretched deeper, lakes formed and disappeared. None of it was sudden, and yet all of it was profound. The Earth adapted to the cold with the same quiet grace its inhabitants showed. It bent without breaking. It changed without losing itself. Even the great ice sheets, immense and powerful, moved with the gentleness of deep time. They didn't rush forward. They eased across the land. They didn't crack the Earth apart. They carved it into smoother, softer forms. And beneath their weight, the planet continued to breathe. Heat rising from its core, water circulating through hidden lakes, tectonic plates drifting slowly in the dark beneath the crust. As the world warmed again, the Earth welcomed each change with the same steady strength. The glaciers melted and the land rose back up. Rivers found new routes. Forests filled in the spaces once held by frost. Life returned in waves of green and motion. There was no fear in this transformation, only flow. The planet showed us that strength is not always loud. It can be silent, grounded, enduring. It can be the ability to shift gently rather than resist, to hold steady rather than forcefully push, to allow change and still remain whole. In a deeper way, the Earth mirrors the resilience inside each of us. We too weather seasons of cold, weight and pressure. We too reshape ourselves over time, sometimes slowly, sometimes quietly, but always moving toward balance, and when the warmth returns, as it always does, we rise again, carrying the memory of endurance. As you imagine the Earth beneath the glaciers, patient, flexible, unbroken, let that image soften your thoughts. Let it remind you that you do not need to meet every change with force. Sometimes strength is the ability to bend, to wait, to breathe through a long season and trust that warmth will come. The quiet strength of Earth is within you too, steady, timeless, and always ready to rise again. As the Ice Age slowly loosened its grip, warmth didn't rush back all at once. It returned gently, like the first light of dawn spreading across a quiet landscape. The shift from cold to mild was not a sudden transformation. It was a long sigh, a softening of edges, a gradual awakening of the world after a deep and ancient sleep. Imagine the first signs of this warming. Snow lingers, but melts earlier each year. Patches of green appear sooner on the tundra, small at first, just hints of colour breaking through the pale ground. Streams begin to flow earlier in spring, their thin ribbons of water sparkling in the returning sunlight. Birds arrive days or weeks sooner than their ancestors once did, following instincts shaped across generations of shifting climate. In the far north, The great ice sheets shrink slowly, like blankets being folded back by invisible hands. Their surfaces glisten with meltwater, forming tiny channels that snake across the ice before slipping down into deep blue caverns hidden below. Each droplet, each trickle, each small stream of melting ice is a quiet note in a much larger symphony. The warming earth finding its voice again. Forests respond in their own steady way. Trees grow taller, push farther north, and spread roots into soil that has thawed for the first time in thousands of years. The air grows richer with pollen, the scent of young leaves, and the soft hum of insects returning to their cycles of life. Animals too feel the shift. Herds wander into new territories, their migrations guided by new patterns of vegetation. Small mammals emerge earlier from their burrows. Even predators adjust their rhythms, following prey through landscapes that seem to breathe a little easier with each passing century. Humans continue moving with the land. They settle near rivers swelling with meltwater, fish in lakes newly formed by the retreating ice, and gather plants flourishing in the warmer climate. They paint new stories on cave walls, stories not only of cold and survival, but of renewal, growth, and returning colour. As the centuries pass, the Earth transforms further. The glaciers pull back into the farthest reaches of the poles. The tundra softens into sprawling grasslands. Forests regain their ancient branches. Rivers carve their modern courses. Coastlines settle into the shapes we recognise today. The world becomes warmer, greener, and more vibrant than at any point in tens of thousands of years. And yet, this warmth carries no sense of haste. It moves gently, allowing life to adjust step by step. The transition is not a leap, but a flow, a quiet reminder that even profound transformations can unfold with grace. As you imagine this warming world, let its gentle return ease your thoughts. Feel the soft rise of sunlight, the gradual unfurling of green, the slow awakening of the land. Let the warmth settle over your mind like a blanket just pulled from sunlight, comforting, calm, and full of quiet possibility. When we step back and look at the full sweep of the Ice Age, from the first drift of falling snow to the slow, steady return of warmth, we see a world shaped by rhythms far older than humanity, and yet within those rhythms we find ourselves woven gently into the story, not at the centre, but as one small thread in a tapestry stretching across time. Our ancestors walked through these frozen landscapes long before cities, agriculture, or written history. They trace migration routes created by ice, settled in valleys carved by glaciers, and built their earliest communities beside rivers born from melting frost. Many of the paths we travel today, roads, rivers, coastlines, follow lines drawn by a world long gone. Imagine standing in a modern valley surrounded by forests and flowing water. Beneath your feet lies a memory. This valley was shaped by glaciers thousands of years ago. The soil was carried here by ancient winds. The river followed a path carved by ice. Even the plants around you are descendants of species that survived the cold by shifting and adapting. Humans too carry memories of the Ice Age deep within. Not always consciously, but in ways passed through our biology and behaviour. Our bodies remember scarcity and movement. Our minds remember the importance of cooperation, the instinct to gather around warmth, the comfort of firelight, the deep calm of watching the sky. All these are echoes from a time when survival depended on them. The Ice Age reminds us that we come from a long lineage of beings who listened to the land, respected its rhythms, and learned to move with it. It reminds us that resilience is part of who we are. Not loud resilience, but quiet endurance, shaped by generations of adapting to a world far larger than ourselves. And yet, in the vast timeline of Earth, our presence is brief. We are a recent chapter in a story that stretches across millions of years. This perspective isn't meant to diminish us, but to comfort us. It tells us we do not need to carry the weight of the world alone. The Earth has changed before, slowly, patiently, and it will continue to change long after us. Our role is not to control every shift, but to understand our place within the flow. Imagine the Ice Age world fading into the present. The glaciers retreat, the forests return, oceans rise, life adapts. And through these changes, humanity grows, from small bands of travellers to vast interconnected societies. Yet even now, as we sit in warm rooms, lighted homes, or beneath starry skies, we are still part of the same long memory. We carry the same breath, the same instincts, the same quiet awareness of nature's cycles. As you hold this reflection, let it soften your thoughts. Let it remind you that you are connected to a story larger than any single moment of fear or uncertainty. You are part of a world that has endured, transformed, and continued with grace across the ages, and just like the Earth, you hold within you the ability to adapt, to endure, and to find peace in the slow, steady rhythm of time. As we reach the end of this quiet journey through the Ice Age, we return to the question that opened our path. What does it mean for a world to change so slowly that 1,000 years feels like a breath, and 1,000,000 years like the beat of a distant drum? The Ice Age offers its answer not in words, but in the calm example of a planet that reshaped itself patiently, deliberately, and without haste. Imagine standing once more on a frozen plain at dawn, the horizon softened by pale light. Now imagine watching the scene transform, but not in moments, rather across centuries. The glacier pulls back by meters each decade. Forests advance by kilometers each generation. Rivers carve their paths grain by grain, and life, in all its forms, adjusts in countless quiet ways. What appears frozen, still, or unmoving in a single lifetime is revealed as deeply dynamic when we widen our view. Time, true time, moves gently. It flows like wind across grass, like meltwater through stone, like starlight drifting across a night sky. We, as humans, often rush through our days, measuring life in hours, deadlines, and quick decisions. But the Earth invites us to remember another pace, a slower, softer rhythm where change unfolds without force. The Ice Age shows us that transformation doesn't need to be loud to be profound. A continent can shift under the weight of ice without a single sound. A valley can be carved not by violence, but by the slow pressure of frozen water. Warmth can return not with fire, but with a gentle rise of light across the generations. And life itself, ours included, can grow quietly through patience. When we place our own worries, hopes, and uncertainties beside this immense timeline, something softens. We realize that we are not late, we are not behind, we are not failing to move fast enough. We are simply moving at the human rhythm, short breaths within a long story. The Ice Age teaches us that some questions cannot be rushed, some paths must unfold, and some seasons must be experienced fully before the next arrives. As you reflect on everything we've wandered through, glaciers and tundra, long nights and pale skies, mammoths and hidden lakes, let the wider arc of time settle gently into your thoughts. Let it remind you that your own life, like the Earth, contains seasons of cold and warmth, stillness and motion, holding on and letting go. And just as the world emerged from its ancient winter with new forests, new rivers, and new possibilities, you too can move through your own changes with patience and quiet hope. You're part of time's long flow, not separate from it. You're carried gently within it, shaped but not defined by its passing. And in this perspective, there is comfort, a soft place to rest your thoughts, knowing that everything moves, everything shifts, everything finds its way. As the final traces of the Ice Age faded into the warmth of the world we know, the last drifts of ancient frost softened quietly in the morning light. No grand ending marked the moment, no sudden thaw or dramatic final melt. Instead, the last remnants of a frozen era simply glimmered, dissolved and slipped gently into the soil, as though the earth were exhaling the final breath of a long, cold dream. Imagine a small patch of snow lingering in the shade of a hill. Above it, young grasses sway in a breeze that carries the scent of spring. Birds echo through forests that have returned after thousands of years of patient migration. Rivers run steadily across channels carved by ice long vanished. The world feels familiar now, alive, green, open. But if you look closely, you can still sense the memory of cold in the shape of the land, in the wide plains left behind by the tundra, in the rounded curves of valleys sculpted by glaciers, in the quiet lakes born from ancient meltwater. The Ice Age doesn't disappear completely, it remains in the earth's bones, folded gently into the landscape like a story preserved in soft layers of time. We too carry pieces of that ancient winter within us, in the way we gather around warmth, in the instincts that guide us toward shelter and community, in the quiet sense of awe we feel beneath a cold sky shimmering with stars. We are connected to that frozen world not by memory, but by lineage, by the lives of those who walked through frost before us, who learned resilience not through speed but through patience. As you imagine the last drift of Ice Age frost melting beneath the gentle sun, let the image settle softly into your thoughts. Let it remind you that even the most enduring winters eventually yield to warmth. That change arrives quietly, not always as fire, but often as a gradual softening. And that the world, like you, moves through its seasons with grace, with flow, and with a quiet strength that endures long after the cold has passed. Everything flows, sleep in that motion,